Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Getting At-Risk Readers Back on Track with Research-Based Intervention. My name is Shannon Ramlochin, and I'm a marketing manager at Amplify. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll email out the recording link for you to rewatch as you'd like. And everyone here with us today will also receive a certificate of attendance. We have a live captioner with us, so if you want to access the captions, click on the live transcript in the bottom tray. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them at the end. We welcome comments in the chat, and to start, let's find out where everyone is joining us from today, what your role in education is, and maybe what you'd like to learn today. Wow. Guests from all over the world. I see Bermuda, I see North Carolina, Oregon, Las Vegas. Great. Just a quick note too, we have more webinars scheduled for this series. So if you haven't already signed up for more, please do. If you missed our session on exploring MTSS and the science of reading, you'll be able to catch the next session on November 7th. To find out about the other webinars in this series and watch recordings of past webinars, visit amplify.com/SOR-everyone-fall 2022. Thank you again for joining, everyone. We are so excited to have Sarah McCarty join us as today's host. She is the Director of Literacy and Math at Amplify. And Sarah is a former teacher, and she's still teaching elementary students literacy now, just in the world of tutoring. Hi, Sarah, how are you today?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing well. Thank you, Shannon. And thank you for everyone for joining us. I'm excited to see where everyone's from and your roles here in education. And so for today, we are going to kick us off by talking about intervention. Intervention in the scope of the science of reading. Intervention in terms of the framework of multi-tiered systems of support. And to the title of today, Getting At-Risk Readers Back on Track with Research-Based Interventions. Here at Amplify, we have two programs, mCLASS Intervention and Amplify Reading, that we'll go over as well. And do stay for the Q&A at the end. We have folks, Karen, Shannon, Victoria, that are in Albania that are here supporting that chat and Q&A, but we'll also have a live time together here at the end. So I'm all about sharing resources as a former educator. And so our friends at the Reading League have put together this small book that is a great soup to nuts for the science of reading and MTSS that Shannon will drop here in the chat for you to get your copy today. It's a great book for all things universal instruction, but it definitely applies to topics here on intervention that we're going to be spending time with today. And so I just want to start with the simple view of reading. The simple view of reading, you've probably seen this in many of our series this fall that we're focused on. The science of reading is for everyone. But this is critical here to our starting point of our conversation with intervention, because if I can't decode the symbols in a sentence, I can't read, even if I'm familiar with the language that the sentence is written in. And so thinking about the simple view of reading and wanting to get all students to be skilled readers, I know we're here for intervention, but I'm going to start with talking about universal core instruction. So a universal core instructional program that is grounded in the science of reading, strong in language comprehension with our equation here, and strong in word recognition will equal skilled readers. And I want to start with that topic first, because You've probably heard this before, but I'll say it here. We can't intervene our way out of a tier 1 problem. And so thinking about the simple view of reading, like how does that apply then to at-risk students? So we know in order for instruction and intervention to be effective, it needs to be specific to the student's literacy skill need. So on the left of this equation is language comprehension. So if I have students who are struggling with language comprehension, my instruction for intervention would be very specific to that topic. It would be content knowledge and comprehension strategies. Thinking about the second part of this equation with word recognition, we also call that decoding. If I have a student struggling in that particular literacy skill area, intervention would be explicit instruction in decoding in order to increase reading comprehension. So an intervention that is unfocused or throws in the kitchen sink with all sorts of literacy skills is not going to be effective for my students who are most at risk, knowing what we know here about the simple view of reading. I actually just want to point out this book again that our friends at the Reading League put together. On pages 22 and 23, they actually outline instructional approaches that are aligned to the simple view of reading for both language comprehension and word recognition. So again, this definitely applies to the world of intervention. So thinking about the simple view of reading, let's get more granular. And so with Scarborough's reading rope, they have outlined those 2 key components here on the left. And then within language comprehension, it talks about all the literacy skills that fall underneath there. And then down below on the left with word recognition, all those literacy skills that fit into that bucket when we think about the simple view of reading. And so intervention programs should empower us as teachers to also help continue weave these skills together to increase reading proficiency and automaticity here. So an intervention program, as we just talked about a second ago, would be specific to a student's needs. So core instruction is happening, but I may have students that need word recognition skills such as phonological awareness. And so teachers can continue to support the weaving of the students' literacy skills through the Scarborough braid by being very specific with that instruction. And in that case, it would actually fall underneath that phonological awareness. So thinking about both models and visuals here, I just wanted to talk about both of them since schools and districts are probably seeing a lot of these models when we're making that shift or we're in the thick of doing the science of reading. In addition, in my research for this webinar, Susan Hall recently put this book together, and I wanted to call out these 8 characteristics of effective intervention instruction. So one is targeted on one skill. Intervention is typically 30 minutes. So we might spend as educators 15 minutes on the first literacy skill, 15 minutes of that 30-minute block on another specific literacy skill, but it is targeted to that skill at that time of direct instruction. Skills are taught in a sequential order. We know the build of how students learn the skills with the science of reading research. And so an intervention program should also continue and partner with that build. Instruction is explicit. Teacher is modeling and explicitly teaching the skill to the student. There is that I do, we do, you do model embedded in an effective intervention instruction. Additionally, the program is very systematic. It embeds multi-sensory techniques. Those could be manipulatives, visual cues. Feedback loops are critical here, as 6 points out. Students make an error. That's the beauty of direct instruction. I hear the error, I see the error. As the leader of the instructional group, I correct the error. And so teacher models and teaches, student practices, that cycle continues. It states in her book until the student is proficient with the task at hand. Minimal teacher talk. All right, I'm a teacher at heart. I like to talk, but during intervention time, it's limited time. We need to limit that teacher talk because we need students producing sounds and students producing the outcome of the task at hand. So we want to limit our teacher talk and thinking about effective intervention instruction. And last but not least, it talks about instructional routines when you're evaluating and looking at effective intervention programs. Instructional routines need to be consistent. so that they're not ever changing. We want the cognitive load for the student on the actual task at hand and not the ever changing instructional routines, right? So let's be thinking about these 8 characteristics when we're looking at intervention programs. And thinking about the second part of our time together today, we talked about at the beginning, what does intervention look like when it comes to multi-tiered systems of support? So you may be very familiar with this image. Your district, your state may have a variation of this model, but this model is actually thinking about our system. So school districts, I'm going to start at the top as a system, the whole of the district, the whole health of a school system, whole grade levels. What's that looking like throughout our building in 4th grade or in 2nd grade? Whole classrooms. We're also looking at this system, sometimes at individual students, but it's not always about that individual student either. We also have to think about the system and thinking about the programs that are in place to support our students and evaluating them. And so this model talks strongly about a proactive and preventative model here when we think about the MTSS model. At the heart of this model is data-based decision-making, and educators of all levels, we're always thinking and asking questions, because the key thing here is that we want to ensure that we're delivering the right instruction to our students at the right time and making changes as we need to throughout the school year. And then sometimes we think about the autopsy at the end of the school year, and then we need to make put into bigger place system changes when we think about programs based off of the data that we're seeing from our system. Questions that we might think about or we ask ourselves, are at least 80% of our students not at risk? Are our at-risk readers making progress? At what rate are they making progress? Like, research shows that students in most at need to be making above or well above typical growth in order to close the gap. Questions like, are our students who are proficient, are they maintaining proficiency with our core instructional program when we check in with them throughout the year? So if you can answer yes to those questions, your system is healthy. It is working well. But when we can't answer yes to those questions, we need to think about the changes that we need to put in place in our system to have better outcomes for our students. And so thinking about those questions, I want to put this image up that you're probably very familiar with. This is that response to intervention, tiered systems of support, where we screen all of our students. And the hope or the expectation is that 80% of our students are ready for core instruction. 15% of our students are at some level of risk and will need some small group instruction. And 5% of our students are those most intensive students that need all 3 tiers of instruction. And so this is what we would hope for. We've recently gone through a pandemic. And so in working with many educators nationally and partnering with them and hearing them and seeing their data sitting side by side, we see that districts have a flipped model. Schools may have a flipped model. A classroom or a grade level, specifically maybe grades 2 and 3 are having flipped models here. And so one thing I just want to think all of us to think about is working effectively with our time. So when the majority of our students have a specific literacy skill need, let's just say in advanced phonics, for example, think about how we can provide additional literacy time to teach the whole class that specific literacy skill, so that we're not doing a maddening thing, right? I've heard teachers say, Sarah, I have so many students at risk in, I'm just going to go back to phonics. And so I need to create all these groups and additional lesson plans, and I just don't have time. Well, if the majority of my students need that skill, let's embed that in tier 1 instruction or another time in my day where I can actually teach that skill to the majority of my students, because our time is precious and students' time is as well. And we need to have that time to actually focus in specifically on the literacy skills that these students need that are in the tier 2 and tier 3. So just think about how we're going to support that. I'd also say if you're having a flip model, as I just shared, you're not alone. feel free to talk about that in the chat. We're here to collaborate with each other today. This article came out on Friday, so this was not in my presentation. I read the article and felt compelled to put this here, that back to that flipped model. If you have in your system a grade, specific classes, a school that has a flipped model, you're not alone. Shannon will drop this article here in the chat for you for your future read. But basically it's saying we have a lot of students that are off track. We have a lot of students that need intensive intervention. And so for the students that you're providing that specific intervention for, think about the intervention program grounded in the science of reading, thinking about MTSS, the data we're collecting, how we're going to group those students, provide specific instruction to close those literacy gaps. And also think about, if the majority of my students have this literacy skill gap, how to embed that into whole class instruction so that we're not losing our minds as teachers, trying to teach a whole bunch of intervention to students when we can just pull them together as a group. So this article is just fresh off the press, and Shannon will share it with you. 3 key things that I want to talk about when I listen to folks talk about MTSS, talk about the science of reading, and specifically in the world of intervention, is that teachers want to do MTSS. They totally believe in MTSS. Here's some things that we can help support them with. Teachers don't have a lot of time. They don't have enough time to create lessons. They will often say, I'm not a curriculum writer. I don't do scope and sequence, but I can teach something. So providing educators and interventionists with tier 2 and tier 3 programs that are built on the science of reading, that are explicit, systematic, and sequential, and have a strong instructional approach is critical, because that's something that we need to get them time back, and we need to think about our system and the programs when we think about MTSS that are in place in our systems. Instructional materials need to have a clear coherence alignment. And so when teachers and interventionists are DIYing resources, there's a risk of non-coherence of instructional materials within our system, within a grade level, within a school. It could be the different ways that strategies are being taught, but we want coherence, alignment of instructional materials that we know fit into the system, are evidence-based, and are going to move the needle for students and close the instructional gap. We also want to be sure that we have the right data for data decisions. So is the data we're collecting granular enough? Is the data that we're using making those database decisions, such as grouping students by a like literacy need that's needed for intervention time? So if you've ever taught intervention or observed interventions, if you have a group of 6 students and you see that 2 students are just like, hey, I know the answer, and they're blurting out the answer, and they're leaning over the table and their hands are reached so high because they know all the answers. And as you're teaching or you're observing this intervention group and you see that you have 2 students that have blank stares, they're sitting there quietly. That content for them is actually too challenging. That says that we didn't have the right data to group the students. And so that intervention time that's happening is not going to be effective. We're not going to have robust results when we don't have the right data to know what our students' strengths are and their deficits when it comes to literacy, and therefore to group the students. So these are the 3 things that we hope to solve for when we think about intervention. So here at Amplify, we think about all these different components that we've covered today. And so I want to take this and bring this visual to life for all of us of the context of everything we've just talked about. And so in an effective early literacy system, all the key components of the system, whether it be assessment and tiers of curricula, align around science of reading so that each element of the system is research-based in the foundation of early literacy, and it works to meet all of our students. And so on the left, if we think about this visual, if this is my classroom, we think about screening all of our students with a universal screener. So that MTSS, one of the 4 components, was definitely screening in that upper left-hand corner. So starting here with screening. Screening can be that 3 times a year benchmark screening. Some states, some schools are also doing dyslexia screening. Many states have laws now about screening for dyslexia, so that can be a part of this visual here, as well as ongoing progress monitoring screening to make sure that all the things that we're doing on the right with instruction are aligned with data. And so once we have our screening completed, we're going to go up to the top right, core instruction. That data is used to inform instructional needs for my whole class as I'm providing universal tier instruction. That data is also used to place students into personalized learning. So that can be enrichment for some students, additional grade level practice for some, and remediation for some students through that personalized learning based off of the data. Lastly, and what we're here today to talk about is placing students from the data into intervention programs that are staff-led and very specific to the students' literacy need that they have. And so I hope this visual makes all of that pre-conversation that we've just had come to life in our everyday worlds in whatever our role is here in education. So I've done a lot of talking. I just want to pause for a second and I want to hear from you. Please utilize the chat and share with us, share with each other, like what is the biggest challenge that you face as a teacher or an interventionist when it comes to planning and delivering intervention? So let's take a moment to drop in what your challenges are. Time and resources, staffing, materials, grouping. Yeah, coherence, that seems to be a big one. Differentiating, meeting different students' needs. Wow. Gal, please keep collaborating. So the same conversations that I'm having here at Amplify with educators nationally, you're definitely, having those same conversations and challenges as well. Thank you so much for sharing. And so, the topic here is research-based interventions at the, why we're here. It's like to get those at-risk students back on track. And here at Amplify, as I shared earlier, we have 2 research-based intervention programs that I just want to take some time and share with you. And so let's kind of kick this off. The very first one is mCLASS intervention. mCLASS intervention is targeted. It is direct instruction, small group of students. It gets at-risk readers back on track that are in grades K through 6. mCLASS intervention is fully scoped in sequence with lesson plans. Some of you mentioned lesson plans was a challenge and materials. So all of that is actually provided within mCLASS intervention. And so mCLASS will do the heavy lifting based off of this 10-day cycle. It helps with the ease of collecting assessment data. It will group your students based off of those specific literacy skills. mCLASS intervention will also provide staff 10 days worth of fully scoped and sequenced lessons. And so let's just start with assessment data, because that's how we should start when we think about the MTSS model. Is data is driving everything that we're doing in our system. And so first with mCLASS intervention, we assess students with the DIBELS 8th assessment plus diagnostic assessment measures. We haven't talked about diagnostic assessment measures. So diagnostics assessments are actually the gateway to so many robust end results. So the gateway to having robust grouping, because diagnostic assessments give us that granular data of what my students' strengths are within a skill strand and what their deficits are within that literacy skill strand. Diagnostic assessments also provide that tight grouping that will allow us to have more robust results and accelerate the students' learning when it comes to intervention time. So that's where we start with the assessments, DIBELS 8 diagnostic assessment measures. Next is the lifting of data analysis. That does take so much time for teachers. And so mCLASS intervention has a built-in algorithm. You're gonna see that live here in just a second. But that algorithm analyzes student data. It tells me as a teacher or interventionist what my student can or cannot do. It also tells me what are the 2 literacy skills that right now this student needs intervention on. It will then, the algorithm, look at all my students' data that I've collected, that I am planning to place into mCLASS intervention, and it will group them by those 2 like literacy skills. And I can select to have those students grouped within grade level, or in some cases with a multi-grade level grouping. That algorithm will also provide specific, fully scoped and sequenced intervention plans for each of my groups of students. And then there's built-in progress monitoring, again, ongoing data as a part of that MTSS cycle. It will prompt the staff leader of the intervention to collect current progress monitoring data, and the next set of 10-day lessons are customized based off of current data. So that's all the heavy lifting that mCLASS intervention does, which is such a relief as a former teacher and teachers that are using it say. And so let's talk about that analyzing of the data within the algorithm, because I kind of hit on that pretty deeply there just a second ago. So analyzing data is very time consuming, and it can be challenging as an educator. If I'm a new educator, there's a lot going on in my system and I'm learning a lot. So having mCLASS intervention will help with this. So here we have two students who were assessed with nonsense word fluency. It's a phonics and decoding assessment measure within AAA. These students, I just want you to look at their data. They both have 28 and are most at risk. As a teacher, I could easily see grouping these students together in an intervention group saying, yep, 28 most at risk. I'm going to put Karen and Lee into this intervention group, right? However, mCLASS intervention does such granular item level analysis that actually these students have 2 different instructional needs and actually need to be in 2 different instructional groups. So on the left, we have Lee. Lee is struggling with letter sound correspondence. We can see those red marks there on those individual letter sounds that he's struggling with. Lee is also segmenting. Lee's needs are different than Karen's needs on the right, even though they're both 28. Karen is very much proficient with letter sound knowledge. We don't see any red errors over here on the right with Karen's item level analysis that the system is doing for us. We also can see that Karen is actually more advanced. Karen is blending CVCs. And so Karen is at a different place than what Lee is. And so that's the beauty here of what mCLASS intervention will do when it groups our students so that we can reduce the amount of time that students are sitting in intervention. So we do have accelerated learning happening and have robust results within our school systems for our students. So this is a visual of our mCLASS continuum. This is basically taking a look at Scarborough's reading rope, but we put it into a honeycomb model here. So we start students at the beginning of the learning trajectory here with phonological awareness and letter sounds. We move students through decoding and fluency with mCLASS intervention. It culminates to the far right with reading comprehension. The program algorithm will look at each student's data. And in this case, it's highlighting for Lee. Lee needs to start with these 2 literacy skills of letter sound knowledge, sounding out and blending. Karen is going to start off a little bit at a further along spot here. Karen, based off of that item level data analysis that the program did, is ready for regular and irregular words with automaticity. And so this is the beauty of that granular analysis and placing students in 2 like groups so that it's a tight fit here for the instruction that I'm going to provide. So let's take a look at this grouping tool as well. Let me make this just a little bit bigger. So let's start by pretending I'm a first grade. I'm going to focus as an interventionist on my first grade. I have 4 first grade classes that I just selected and put down here into my hallway. And depending on your intervention or your instructional block for intervention, you could say, yes, take all 4 of these classes and group them. And I'm simply not going to select any of the filters. I have 5 or 6 staff. I'm going to pick 6 staff here, and I'm going to say create the groups. You can also customize your groups very specifically within your school system. So I want to actually, for mCLASS intervention in my building, I'm going to say that I want only at-risk students. So I'm going to unselect my proficient students. I'm going to think about students who have IEPs, English language learners. Will they be immersed in mCLASS intervention or not? And so as you make those customized selections, the students here update in the hallway. you select the group size. I'm going to pick 5 students. You think about the number of staff you have. I have 6. I'm simply going to pick these filters and tell the algorithm to group my students, and it will group them based off of their like need. So I have 6 groups. This first group here has 5 students. I can see their hexagons are empty in phonological awareness and letter sounds. This is a good fit. They all have like literacy needs for this group. I also have a more advanced group here, group 6, that I'm going to teach. And you can see they're in the middle here with regular and irregular words. And they all have like literacy needs when we look at their data. All data driven for the grouping tool. So I'm going to bring us back here. And let's take a look then at the lesson sets. So thinking about those 8 characteristics of strong and effective intervention instruction, we have 10 days worth of lesson plans for a 30-minute intervention block within mCLASS intervention. Your students' names are listed here. The skill, the targeted focus of this intervention for this group, all the students in this group are going to be focused on phonological awareness and letter sound knowledge. And so we have, here's my 9 days. This is the flow of the lesson set. On this 10th day, this is that built-in progress monitoring component that lives in MTSS. The staff leader of the intervention, whether it be the teacher, an interventionist, a para-educator, they will progress monitor the students, and the system will prompt what we're going to progress monitor. It's very much data-driven here. Then within each day, you'll notice we have 5 snippets, and these are our sample these are the activities that are taught to students. The beauty here is that the first 2 lessons that I'm teaching in my intervention block are focused on the first literacy skill, direct instruction, first literacy skill. Lessons C and D as part of day 1 are focused on the second skill, very targeted, explicit instruction and letter sound knowledge. E within mCLASS intervention is always a game-like application in our younger grades of one of the skills, and it rotates between the 2 skills as we go through each of the days here. So that was an overview of what that 10-day lesson set looks like. And now I want to show you what does mCLASS intervention look like in a pre-recorded video that we have here. And so I want you to be thinking about the things that we've talked about earlier, like what does the student engagement level look like of all the students in this group? Where do you think the lesson plans are? I want to chat about that. And I want you to be looking for that. Think about the time for students thinking that is given to them. We talked about cognitive load of the task being important in instructional routines. And when you watch this video, think about teacher talk. Let's find the video. We're not going to watch 8 minutes. So we're going to watch about 40 seconds here.
Okay, the next one I would like you to find, sound detectives, is the picture that has "ah" in the middle. You're a good sound detective and look around. Which one has "ah" in the middle? Please. Dog. That's right.
Where do you think those lesson plans are? What do you notice about the student engagement?
Your sound has "ah" in CT. Cat. Yeah, we're so good. I'm going to add all of the pictures.
All right, I'm just going to pause right there. I'm going to take a look at some of your thoughts. Okay. Comments are coming in. Yeah, all students are engaged. There's multisensory. It goes back to those key components there. Yeah, Elise, good. Elise is right. Those lesson plans are actually the teacher or the staff person here that's leading this intervention group. Those lesson plans are on the computer. So mCLASS intervention, you can print the intervention plans. If you need that paper, you can not print because they're PDFs and you can just teach them from a device that you have. Yep, it's building, it's systematic, it's explicit, exactly. All right, so thank you for your participation there with this video and what we're looking for in a research-based intervention program. So I wanted to pull out some lessons here. This is a lower grade lesson, and thinking about what we talked about at the beginning of our time today this is very specific. In this younger grade snippet, this is day 9, lesson B. So remember, there's 5 lessons in our 30-minute time. This is the second lesson of the day. We're very much focused here on middle sound segmentation accuracy. That's our targeted literacy skill here. The pacing is important. How much time should the instructor of the intervention spend on this activity, right? And so pacing is outlined for us so that we have that guide. The materials that are needed to prepare for the intervention time. Direct instruction is here with Mr. Say, that I do, and then we have students down here with their we do and you do time together. And so anytime throughout all of our lessons that are being taught to students, if a child is struggling, there is baked in support right here in the lesson. And should a child be accelerating, we can absolutely challenge them on the spot with that direct instruction during this intervention time. So that's a younger grade level example. And this is an upper grade sample activity. The skill, pacing, materials, that direct instruction, I do, we do, you do model. And again, those supports are baked into the intervention program lesson plans that are provided. Research is very important to any intervention program that we're using in our systems. And so mCLASS intervention was externally validated in the study that was completed with the University of Michigan in partnership with IES. So 14,000 students, 56 elementary schools were part of this. Shannon's going to drop in the chat the link here for this particular study so you can read more. But basically, the end result is that students who participate in K2 and mCLASS intervention outperformed students in that control group when we looked at their composite score on DIBELS from beginning to end of year. And so very much so research grounded, research-based intervention program. And so I want to take some time as well. We said there's 2 programs. So I want to shift over to our second program here at Amplify. It's called Amplify Reading. It is more practice with personalized learning of literacy skills for our students. And so thinking about personalized learning, this was part of that classroom visual model at the beginning of our time together today that basically said, personalized learning is driven by the data, and absolutely it is here in Amplify Reading. Students are placed into Amplify Reading from the data that is collected, and it is ongoingly checking in with students and adapting to their literacy needs. Personalized learning programs allow for enrichment, continuous practice, as well as remediation. Students in Amplify Reading, it's a K-5 program, are in an age-appropriate adaptive digital program that works with them with their friend, their Curioso that they get to customize on a personalized instruction. So if I'm teaching mCLASS intervention with my small group right here, that direct instruction for my most at-risk students, I can rest assured as a teacher that the rest of my students in my classroom are receiving instruction that is personalized to their literacy needs through Amplify Reading. So I can focus here on direct instruction, and students are still getting the learning that they need for literacy as I look out across my classroom. So definitely a partnership program here at Amplify with having those 2. Additionally, Amplify Reading is also externally validated. This actual study I just would point out was from the end of the school year 2021, where grades K through 5 were analyzed for students who were immersed in Amplify Reading for a minimum of 30 minutes a week only, and they showed amazing outcomes here. 35% of those students were more likely to meet or even exceed the benchmark by the end of the school year for those students that were utilizing Amplify Reading. So how do both of these programs also support all of our students? I want to go back to that. We talked about supporting all students' needs when we think about instructional programs in our systems. And so very much aware here at Amplify that we have states and districts, and we should be thinking about our students who have dyslexia. And so both of these programs are meet the recommendations of IDA through the principles of effective instruction and the key content areas of those key literacy skills that need to be taught for students, and when we know that they have been flagged for dyslexia. So rest assured there. Both programs additionally support our students who are Spanish language students. There are Spanish supports that teachers and students who are bilingual or just native Spanish speakers still definitely do appreciate. So rest assured here on these two additional components that I just hit on. And I just want to start wrapping us up. I haven't looked at what time it is. Okay, so I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A, and we do, which is awesome. And so a few things I want to say here as we, part at the end of the hour, and as you're deciding or evaluating your current intervention programs. Some key things, 4 things that I want you to think about for intervention programs that are grounded in the science of reading, and also thinking about that are tied to that MTSS framework model. 1, I'm going to go back to universal tier instruction here when it comes to intervention. Intervention programs should be research-based approach to critical literacy skill development that complement your core science of reading instruction. 2 is that intervention needs to be explicit, fully scoped and sequenced program with their instructional approaches. And 3, we are collecting data, right? Schools and systems have data because we're making data-based decisions when we think about the multi-tiered systems of support. And so data is being collected at timely intervals, either through benchmarking and or additional dyslexia screening and or progress monitoring. Progress monitoring definitely when it comes to intervention. And that the programs have data that drive those data-based decisions and placements for our students. And last but not least, elect intervention programs that have a large impact on students, right? Avoid intervention programs that can't show evidence of effectiveness. Remember, we have limited time to close those literacy gaps for our students. And so we need programs that accelerate student progress for our at-risk readers to get them back on track so that students spend less time needing intervention. And so I think I'll just leave us there with those 4 key things to be thinking about when you're evaluating your current intervention programs or deciding on a new intervention program. And I want to hear from you, like, what are your biggest takeaways today with intervention when it comes to science of reading and multi-tiered systems of support? Drop your takeaways in the chat here. Yeah, so lots of data now. Thinking about the data that you're collecting, how does that align with the lessons that we're providing? Thank you for dropping that in, Roseanne. All right, so if you're not tuned in, I want to drop this out there as an additional resource. If you're not tuned in to the Amplify Science of Reading podcast, come join us. The URL is down here on this particular slide, so please come join us and listen away to all the different folks that are sharing their research on different topics here within the Science of Reading and Amplify. And just also want to point out, leave this up here, we have additional webinars that are coming, so that URL is listed here for you to join us. And I think at this time, Shannon, Karen, Albania, we can open it up to some questions.
Hey,
Oh,
Sarah, can you hear me?
I can. I was actually just reading Jill's comment about short bursts of explicit instruction tailored to the students. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, utilize that data to make sure growth is being made. Thank you, Jill, for sharing that. Yeah, Shannon, any specific questions or Karen that you see?
I see a question in the chat. What do you think about guided reading as an intervention?
So guided reading, I would just point to the research. If you haven't listened to the APM reports on the thoughts of what's coming out of that information, they are in the field of research. I would just take a look and listen to that. Guided reading is not explicit enough is what the research is telling us. So for students that have literacy skill gaps, we need to know what that literacy skill is and provide the direct instruction to that literacy skill. Yes, Catherine, I just want to say, yes, a recording will be available. If you missed it, absolutely, you can watch the recording. I hope your daughter feels better soon. Karen is answering a question in the Q&A about a district already uses doubles 8. How can we utilize intervention or amplify reading? Okay. Awesome. Shannon, I think we're at a good point here.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Sarah, and
Yeah,
to all of
thank
you
you.
for joining us.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome discussion and informative, and sorry if we weren't able to get to your question. So I want to remind everyone that tomorrow you'll be getting an email with a link to the recording and your certificate of attendance. And we have so much more information to share with you in the other webinars in this series, which you can read more about and register for more webinars by visiting amplified.com/SOR-everyone-fall 2022. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you again, everyone, for coming. Good to see you, and thanks, Shannon, so much. Take care.